Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video, and today Indian pulled the covers off their brand new Sports Chief, and I for one quite like what I'm seeing. So here are the 11 key things that you need to know about it. Now, being called the Sport Chief, I'm sure it comes as no great surprise to you that this will form part of the Chief lineup, and naturally it shares most of the same underpinnings. So as the entry point into this cruiser lineup, you've got the Chief Dark Horse at £17,495, and that's got the most stealthy blacked out finish and the most stripped back hardware. Next up, you've got the Chief Bobber with the chunky tires, forward foot controls, and the mini ape hangers, and that'll cost you an extra couple of grand. And then on top of the tree for now, you've got the Super Chief, which has more of a touring focus, so that one gets removable windscreen, the floorboards, the saddlebags, and the 2-up touring seat, and that's £22,095. So the Sport Chief brings something new to this range with a much more performance biased spec, as you'll see when we get to the hardware. And so with all those upgrades, naturally it sits a little bit above the Dark Horse and the Bobber, but maybe not quite as tricked out with all of the touring stuff as the Super Chief. At the heart of it though, you've still got their big torquey Thunderstroke 116 V twin, which appears to be unchanged versus those other Chiefs, and that 116 cubic inches, if you work in metric, converts to like 1.89 litres or 1890 cc's. A huge amount of displacement, and so that's where all the torque comes from, and it's 168 newton meters right down at 3,200 RPM. The result, and I can directly vouch for this, I borrowed the Dark Horse and the Super Chief last year, is boatloads of pulling power that suits this style of cruiser bike right down to the ground. And admittedly, it does come up pretty heavy, especially if you compare it to bikes outside of this segment. It's 302 kilograms as shipped, but certainly in the lower revs, there's plenty of brute force to kind of make up for it. Now, the tubular steel frame looks roughly the same as the other Chiefs in the lineup, but the other chassis equipment is where it varies quite significantly, and we'll start with the suspension. So up front, you've got a 43mm KYB upside down fork as opposed to the right way up fork on the standard bikes, and the result is that it should offer better rigidity and less unsprung weight, and that all helps the suspension to perform better and in turn improve the way the bike handles. In fact, they actually say that it's the same fork as the Challenger lineup of bikes, which do have a more sporty bias than perhaps some of the other bikes in the lineup. Now at the rear, you've got some Fox preload adjustable piggyback shocks, so again what looks like significantly better spec stuff, plus it gets more travel, so 100mm at the rear now, which is up from the 75mm of the other bikes, and they say that gives it a little more lean angle, which of course will help with faster riding through corners. And it's also worth adding that if you want to take it up another notch and perhaps add a little bit more customization to the ride, then there are some fully adjustable Fox shocks in the accessories catalog. Brakes also get a boost, so at the front, whereas the other Chiefs get a single 300mm disc with an own branded 4-pot caliper, the Sport Chief gets a pair, so twin discs, and they're 320mm, so a bit bigger, but also some Brembo 4-pot radially mounted calipers, and that should greatly improve its stopping ability. Honestly, it always takes me quite a while to get used to some of these big American cruisers where the front brake is always a little bit underpowered for me, and the rear is like usually a pretty big disc, and so to get proper stopping ability on some big bikes like this, you really do have to get used to applying both at the same time. So this for me is probably one of the most welcome upgrades, because it should allow a lot of us to just jump on a bike like this and ride it with our regular riding style. Now the wheels are the same dimension as the Chief Dark Horses, so a 19-inch front and a 16 rear, but they do get a different spoke pattern, and also the front has to be built to carry that second disc. Still, it's going to feel lighter and more sporty than the spoked fat rims on the Bobber and Super Chief, and also the tires come in the form of Pirelli Night Dragons, which Pirelli say are a custom cruising tire with the Pirelli sporty feeling, so should be relatively sticky. Ergonomically, this bike is a little different to the other bikes in the lineup, so it does get the mid-position pegs that you'll find on the Dark Horse, which personally I really like for more sporty riding because you can properly support your body weight, but also the bars are up on some fairly tall risers as standard, so 152mm, and Indians say it's a commanding yet comfortable riding position. Again, there's some options in the accessories catalog, so there's some 254mm risers, so really quite tall, and also the Sport Chief comes in a single seat setup as standard, but there are also some 2-up saddles and a backrest to be found in there as well. Now on top of that, you've got the quarter fairing, and it should give you you a little bit of wind protection, and there are accessory high and low screen options to play with, but really it's about giving it that styling and a bit of a semi-retro look. Personally, I quite like it, but I do have that feeling already that it might be a bit polarizing, so let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. Now, one of the great features of the Chief lineup, for me anyway, is the Ride Command infotainment system that's built into that little TFT dash, so it's great to see it again here. Basically, that round form factor helps to keep it looking in keeping with the classic vibes of the overall bike, but also the TFT functionality means that it has a complete infotainment system in there with built-in nav and Bluetooth connectivity. In fact, you can also use it to manage the riding modes, so Sport, Standard, and Tour. Visually, we've got 3 color choices, so Black Smoke, which is the base model and has a matte finish. On top of that, there's Ruby Smoke, which looks pretty good to me. I do like the sort of punchiness of the red, but I think my pick of the bunch would be the Stealth Grey. I've seen this on some of their other bikes like the Scout Rogue that I borrowed last year and the Chief Dark Horse, and I think the Indian bikes always look good in this Stealth Grey. Price-wise, you're looking at £19,995 for the standard Black Smoke, whereas the other more fancy paint jobs will cost you an extra 500 quid, so £24,995. Whether that's good or bad always requires a bit of context. I mean, certainly you can see versus the Dark Horse how the extra 2 or 3 grand is worth it given all those performance upgrades. But what about the competition from the other manufacturers? Well, for me, the closest equivalent is Harley's Lowrider S, and the power and weight and dimensions all look pretty similar to me. Perhaps there's a little bit more quality in the brakes and suspension here, and also you've got that Ride Command system, which is a lot more fully featured than the dash on the Harley. And so with those things in mind, I think the extra 500 quid on the price is easy enough to justify. As always, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below, and if you haven't seen my full review of the Super Chief already, I'll stick it on the screen here, give it a watch, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.